All right, welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're going to talk about between race maintenance, tires, and track safety for everybody, the drivers, the marshals, and the kids glaring on in excitement. Tonight we got Jimmy McKinley in the house. Say hello to Jimmy Mack.
Howdy, howdy.
So, Jimmy, give us a kind of conscious breakdown of what you do between races to your car to ensure that your day at the track is less stressful.
Well, it actually starts when I get home, or when I'm leaving the track from the previous race. I try not to leave the track with broken cars.
Right, right.
I
Ma-
think we all do.
Main goal, yeah.
Um, you know, um, and then once I get home and get unloaded and everything, it's going to depend on how far out the next race is. So I usually start about a week ahead of the next race, getting stuff ready to go.
Okay, well, with that being said, you usually run more than one class, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it takes you roughly a week to get everything ready.
Well, I start about a week out. The first couple of nights, I'll just kind of go through the cars, make sure nothing's broken on them. So if the race is on Saturday, like the weekend before, I'll start kind of going through stuff. I want to make sure I don't have any broken parts, any bent parts, um, things like that. Um, Especially with the pan cars, make sure there's no broken T plates. Make sure all the screws are still in the car. I've come home before and I've had screws missing out of pod plates and things like that.
Yeah,
So
that happens quite often, especially for me. Like when I put together a new kit and take it out for the first time, after the chassis goes around the track and flexes some, uh, the screws have a tendency to back off a little bit. So yeah, I even but the week before, sometimes I do it even in between rounds. I check all my screws on my chassis.
sure, yeah, and I mean, yeah, when you're at the racetrack, you want to make sure everything's still together as well. You do what you can in the time you have between races, or um, you know, um, if if your car gets super tweaked, gets hit hard, you busting up bumpers or plates, T plates or whatever. That's stuff you got to take care of. At the racetrack. Um, as far as at home maintenance, I will usually go, like I said, go through the car, make sure it's clean. I get all the tire dust and dirt and everything out of it. Um, Check all the bearings, make sure there's no blown out bearings. I usually rebuild my shocks about every 3 race weekends or so. Um, Depending on what car it is, obviously. Um, replace the front springs on cars, Legends cars, Spec 10 cars, whatever it is. They all have front springs on them. And over time, those springs start to sag, and your car will handle it differently than it does with a fresh set of springs, obviously. So stuff like that, you got to make sure keep up on it, and stuff like that's really cheap too. You're talking $2-3 for a pair of springs. Um, if it's before a major race event, I will usually tear the whole car down to the chassis. Um, Take everything completely apart. I'll make sure all the pivot balls are still good. Make sure all the shock shafts are still straight. Make sure your kingpins are straight. Um, Polish everything. Anything that moves, you want it to move freely. You don't want anything binding up and tightening up, because then the car is just not going to work right.
Now, what about what do you do to your motors in between races? Do you clean them and lube the bearings, or do you just kind of like, eyeball them and leave them alone, or?
Yeah, again, you'll get a lot of tire dust and dirt in your bearings and your motors. So that's something you got to keep an eye on. Don't let them get all gunked up with rubber. Just spray them out. I just use like regular motor cleaner, and they usually come with that long nozzle, that real small thin nozzle, and that's good for spraying out the bearings of your motors. You don't necessarily have to remove it from your car, unless you're doing some tuning on the motors, or replacing the motor. Um, Another thing to check is make sure the motor shaft is straight. You don't want to be running with a bent motor shaft.
Okay.
Um, Once I get the car torn down and cleaned up and polished, um, that's when I start getting them back together. And depending on what car it is, I'll make sure it meets the minimum weight rule if there is one. And then I'll start setting the ride heights of camber and the corner lengths on the cars. A good set of scales helps. Um, so you want that car to be as close to race ready as possible before you go back to the racetrack. You don't want to be fighting something that's bent or tore up when you get to the racetrack on a race day.
Exactly. Yeah, it makes for a rough day, and I myself know that I have a hard enough time doing everything I need to do, family wise and stuff, to just run one car at a time. The
Okay.
maintenance and the upkeep is well more than enough to keep me busy. So when you start running multiple classes and getting your program together, so to speak, um, it kind of becomes second nature. You kind of get a rhythm for things. You kind of know where your car's at all the time. Where if you don't do the maintenance and you don't do the prep work, you have no idea. You might have clipped a board or hit a flapper and stove up a bearing, and now your bearing's bad and you have no idea. And the first time you put it on the track, it's doing weird stuff compared to what it was doing when you quit the last week. So um, I try to do as much as I can, and even in between rounds, I try to keep an eye on things. The end play in the axles. I've seen last 2 weeks. I've seen two broken axles. Um, you got to make sure that, like you said, the car is moving freely. Everything moves freely. I check the steering blocks, that make sure they move up and down freely, and like you, the front springs. I try to keep an eye on those. But for the most part, I haven't gotten to the point yet where I've disassembled the entire chassis to start over. I'm in the process right now of working on an Awesomatics car where I'm rebuilding the dampeners and the differential and putting the car back together, and I had to order a few parts that were back ordered. So I now have those parts in my possession, and I'll cover a little bit of that kind of maintenance for on-road touring cars kind of stuff, because all the stuff that Jimmy and I are trying to address here is general across the board. It doesn't matter if you're running a pan car, it doesn't matter if you're running a Legends, it doesn't matter if you're running Euro Truck. You got to make sure that the stuff is good to go before you throw it on the track. Last week I threw my car down and it was doing a frog hop thing, and I couldn't figure out what was going on, and Tyler Gerber picked the car up and the shock had come apart. Well, I hadn't checked to see, but apparently it backed off, the shock shaft backed out of the collar and it just came apart. So basically, if you don't keep an eye on stuff and take a good close look at your equipment every week before the track, or a lot of guys spend months building a car and getting it ready for a big race, say like the Snowbirds or something along that line. Like some of this stuff takes an entire year to get ready to go to. I know guys that are getting ready to go to the Snowbirds immediately after the Snowbirds are over.
Yeah.
They're already talking about building new cars and getting ready for next year's big race. So getting the maintenance routine down and taking the time to dial it in, so to speak. Um,
Yeah. Um, even at the track, you're talking about in between round maintenance and whatnot. If your car takes a hit on the track, don't hesitate to pull off and check everything.
exactly.
Because that's where you're going to bend up your aluminum. You're going to bend a hub. You're going to bend a motor plate. You could bend a kingpin. You could bend a shock shaft. Pretty much just take the car off the track and look at it carefully. Um, that's where it helps to carry spare parts. Um, you know, it, spare parts are fairly cheap compared to full on kit. You don't need to carry a full on backup car, but if you break, let's say a bumper, a graphite bumper, a carbon fiber bumper at the racetrack, and you don't have a backup piece for it, your day's done because you're
Yeah,
not going to be able to mount the bottom.
and
You
we've
can't
all
just
done
shoot.
it.
Go
We've all
ahead.
done it. We've all gone to the track with a fresh kit with no spare parts and thrown it down on the track and raced it with no extras. That's a risk we've pretty much all taken, knowing that in less than a blink of an eye, your entire race day could be over, and you're not even in the first heat yet. You're out there hot lapping in practice and trying to figure your setup out. And you tag a flapper or a board, you could be done for the day. And there's no worse feeling in the world than to get all excited to go try your new car and you don't have any spares. And basically, that's when it comes to who's the nice guy at the track who's gonna loan you or sell you a part that he might also have for the chassis you're running. Um, I don't like taking that risk either because, like you said, the simple stuff like springs and maybe an extra T-plate or a couple extra bumpers, some extra bearings. Those bearings are so cheap nowadays. I remember when we used to buy the little deal, the hook to the nozzle on the spray can and spray out your bearings and re-lubricate everything. Like, that's fine if you want to continue to do that kind of thing, but those bearings are like $1 a piece.
Yeah,
Unless you're buying some ceramic hybrid type of go fast, bearing. The general bearings for like the spec stuff are less than $1 a piece. So, uh, it pays multiple dividends when you invest just a few bucks, and I'm talking probably less than $100 worth of stuff. A couple extra bumpers, some extra springs, some bearings, some shims of some sort to make sure that you're not over or
spare
under the.
that.
Yeah, right. And back in the day, they used to have what Ray at Niftec used to have these things called bearing savers. They were actually a polymer axle shim, and I haven't seen those in a long time, but I've used them when he came out with them, and I can tell you they work. When you tag the board or tag a flapper and stove up the axle, the the, the composite shim would break before it would blow your bearing out. And I've already had the experience where I'm using the regular shims, tag the board, and my bearing gets destroyed. So um, the little things in your toolbox, as far as extra parts, do you kind of use your own judgment as to what you think you should have, or do you kind of ask around to see if the car has a, shall we say, particular appetite for, say, kingpins or, uh, you know, axles or whatever?
Well, to be honest, I've been at this long enough, as I'm sure you have as well. You kind of know what you need to keep in the box, as
Right.
far as spare parts go, and that's also going to depend on your skill level, your driving skill level.
Exactly.
You know, a lesser experienced guy will probably want to carry two or three spare bumpers in his box until he gets um, uh, that skill level up to where he knows he's not tearing up front bumpers.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
even every once in a while, it's been a long time since I've done it, but I have hit a wall hard enough sideways where I've actually bent a motor pod plate.
Yeah.
Um, that's going to throw the whole car out of whack if you've been one of them things up. So it helps to know what chassis you're running for one, and to carry the correct parts that you need for that chassis in your box.
Yeah,
You
when you start running 3 or 4 classes, that too can get kind of chaotic. I actually have finally gotten to the point where all the parts for my cars are individually organized per box, and I'm creating labels on the Cricut so that I know this box is for Awesomatics, this box is for CRC, this box is for, everything. I know exactly what box of parts I need to to go into my pit box so that I know that I have the right combination. I'm no longer sorting through odds and ends looking to see if I still have something. Like getting organized in the pits. Um, I got a little video coming. You'll see that these guys in the pits, they lay their stuff out all neat, nice, and organized. It's not. I'm a kind of pile it up kind of guy. I haven't really ever been organized in the pits, and I can tell you just the little bit of conscious effort I put into trying to stay organized in the pits makes the day also go smoother. You're not constantly looking. You know that these 3 nut drivers that I've got right here cover this whole car, and this, the right height gauge, the camber gauge, it's all right here at your fingertips, and you're not shuffling through bins or shuffling through your pit box looking for tools to try to figure your stuff out.
Yeah,
The biggest thing that I've noticed is, like, when you start to race more classes, it makes the time go by in between races that much better. But you got to be careful, because certain races, if there's not a whole lot of time between heats or not a whole lot of time between rounds, you could end up racing, as we all have, was what they call back to back, where you're in the next race and you're trying to find somebody to marshal for you because you're up next and you're working on your cars in multiple classes. It gets a little chaotic. So the pit organization, pit box organization, between round maintenance and between event
I
maintenance,
hope.
between at home, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all huge contributing factors into how your race day turns out.
Right, and a big part of between round maintenance and at home maintenance, that nobody really thinks about is battery.
Yes, I was going
Uh,
to ask you in the beginning when you said it starts immediately when you leave the race, when you get home. Do you put all your batteries into storage mode, or do you cycle them and then put them into storage mode? Like, how do you do it?
so basically, after the final race of the day at an event, my batteries are usually down to about 3.9, 3.8 anyways. So
Right,
I'll actually just leave those sit until it's time for me to go racing again. And again, part of that week of building up to the next race and getting cars ready is while I'm doing that, I'm cycling the batteries back up.
right,
So I
okay.
will, so I will charge them back up to the full voltage, run 2 or 3 discharge cycles through them, and then charge them back up, and then they're
Okay.
ready to go for the next race.
Yeah, and for those that we're talking about a 1S, like spec type pack.
One
Um,
S or two S, either one.
yeah, I was going to say it's pretty much the same maintenance type of deal, whether you're running a 1 cell or a 2 cell pack. The only difference
Now,
is the balance issue.
right. And if you're not going to be racing for a couple of months, at that point, then I would discharge them down the storage mode.
Right, right.
If you don't want them sitting with a full or
Now,
half full covered.
I've already made that mistake several times, Jimmy, and had to toss out several batteries. Wayne and them guys say you have to unplug your speed controller from your battery. Well, I leave my crap laying around and don't unplug it. And somehow or another, something goes on and the speed controller sucks the juice out of the battery, and now I've only got a battery that registers as a 1S instead of a 2S when I plug it into the charger, and the charger doesn't recognize it. So I immediately tried to lie to the charger and tell it was nickel metal and then zap it a little bit, but I killed the battery. I took the risk and tried to revive it and ruined it. So there was, $80-$100 battery in the garbage. Every time I've invested in it, I've learned that the maintenance is just as important. Battery maintenance is just as important as car maintenance, because batteries aren't cheap, boys and girls. You know this, and I am a really bad example of how to properly take care of your batteries. I try, but I just don't get there every time. I've been lucky so far. Knock on wood, you know.
Yeah, I've never had, I've had batteries pump on me, but I haven't had a battery go up on me yet.
Knock on wood, me neither, but I've seen it in
Yeah,
person, and it is
um,
one
I,
smelly experience.
I've seen them, I have seen them go up before. But, what was I going to say? As far as battery maintenance goes, you could get away with cheap battery chargers, but that should be one of your main investments, is a good battery charger.
Yes, I firmly concur, man. Having a good battery charger that can tell you the data on your battery. A lot of the higher end chargers now, and even some of the smaller ones with the touch screen and things, are the technology is getting to the point now where you can pretty much diagnose the whole battery. The iCharger actually has a servo plug and a USB plug and stuff in it. You can test servos with your battery charger. You know what I mean? So being able to test your batteries and test a few pieces of your equipment with and diagnose what's going on with your car makes things a lot easier. Yeah, you got to spend a few more bucks, but once again, it's one of those items that you never kind of grow out of. You know, it never get, well, I need a new charger because this one doesn't do what I got. You know, uh, generally guys end up with multiple chargers because they're running multiple classes, and trying to charge and maintain several batteries in a race day takes a really good battery charger, and it takes a really good power supply. A lot of guys also need to look at investing in a serious power supply that will run your equipment without overworking your power supply. I myself personally tried to run a Turbo 30 off a power supply that I had here, and it would start to charge the battery, and as the amperage increased, it would short charge. It would tell it was done charging, when in actuality it was drawing so much amperage from the power supply it was kicking off, and we couldn't figure it out. And of course, Wayne Gerber figured it out for me, and I had to invest in a better power supply, because the amperage of the power supply wasn't up to the amperage of the charging unit that I had. So make sure when you start running, uh, you know, if you start running multiple classes, that you have a power supply and have invested in a good battery charger to do what you need to do, that isn't going to cause more race day stress for you.
That's where a good multi-port charger will come in handy. There's some chargers that'll charge that have 2 ports, some that have 4 ports.
Yeah,
Depends on
I've
the
seen those. I've never, like I said, the only experience I have so far is with the 308 iCharger Duo, and the old school stuff. You know, the old Turbo
I
30,
have,
Turbo 35, and the old wind up style with the ceramic resistors and the timer. You know, that kind of thing.
yeah,
When you used to when you used to had to peak your batteries before you went out on the track.
right. Um, yeah. So I have a Turbo 35 GFX, and I have a Thunder Power 610 charger. So I have enough I have chargers to charge my car from multiple classes.
Right.
I would love to look at getting um, good single multi-port charger instead of carrying around 2 different batteries.
Right. Right.
Um, so let's get back to the maintenance thing real quick, if we
Okay.
could.
Go.
So while I've got batteries cycling on the charger, um, that's when I'm either taking a car apart or putting it back together. Uh, Sometimes the cycling takes forever.
Yeah.
Um, I can usually go through, I can take apart 2 cars a night, or I can put together 2 cars a night.
Okay.
So if I'm running multiple classes, I'll have everything done and ready, before, obviously before I leave.
Right.
Uh, Once I get the cars back together, well, let me back up for a second. I should say, if you're going through this maintenance routine, you can't just throw the car on a racetrack. You have to set it up before you go back to the racetrack.
Yeah.
Set your ride height with the correct tires that you're going to run. Um, set the corner weights if you have a good set of scales. If not, usually somebody at the racetrack has scales. Um, make sure your car meets minimum weight. Um, Usually, if you're at home, your home scale will be really, really close to the track scale. I know mine's a little off. It's not that far off from what the track is. And same thing when you're charging your batteries. Check the voltmeter. But you're always going to want to double check it at the racetrack with the track equipment.
Yes, yes. That's been
That's
a proven theory. Your
that's
scale and
gonna
your multimeter is going to be different than the scale and the multimeter in tech at the track. So, yeah, make sure you use the track equipment to test your equipment to make sure you're on par with the rules.
right, because that's going to determine whether or not your car passes test or not. Not your stuff you have sitting at home.
And I too have personally done that in the past where you just kind of assume your car is good to go. You throw it out there, you set it up, you work on it all day, you get ready to go through tech, and all of a sudden your car's underweight.
It's
So
either
now,
underweight or overvolted.
so you're working on a setup for a car that isn't to weight. So now your setup, when you add the weight, is going to be totally different. So now you got to start all over again, setting up the car for the correct weight, and you just spend all day setting it up for the incorrect weight, running it in practice. I've done that before. So yeah, make sure before you get started on your setup that your foundation is laid and your car is at weight.
Make sure your car is legal weight, legal voltage, legal ride height
Right.
before you even go out and turn any practice.
Yeah. Before you turn any practice laps, that should be the first order of business. And I'm guilty of making that mistake all the time because I assume that it's there. Yeah, my car's there. And it ends up being you go through tech and it's not, and then you're back at it again. The other thing I want to talk about is tires. A lot of guys in the beginning, and myself included, are curious to know just how long their tires last. Because I was using tires that were several years old, the rubber tires, and the biggest improvement I made in my handling all day was buying a new set of tires because I didn't realize the tires I were using were pretty much clapped out. Well, I ran this new set of tires, and I'll post pictures of this here later. I bought the brand new set of tires. I put them on the car. I ran them an entire race afternoon at the gate, and then I took photos of the tires to see how the tires were breaking in, so to speak. Um, how do you know from racing when your tires start to go? How do you know when your tires need replaced, basically?
Um, with I run mostly the foam tire stuff,
Right,
so I because we screw the tires down so much. I actually like to start my tires just a little bit bigger to get a little bit more wear out of them.
right,
Um,
right,
so, for example, our 21.5 truck, 10 scale cars, or 17.5 home tire cars, SK, stuff like that, those cars, I like to start my right rear tire at about a 2.08 inch diameter. The left rear will be a 2.09, the left front will be a 2.07, and the right front will be a 2.08. That gives me plenty of wear to get out of them. The spec tires are pretty decent on tire wear, the purple stripe tires. And I will run those things till they get down to about a 2.02. So I'll get a good half cent of wear out of those tires.
Okay. Because that's the one thing that concerns me as well is knowing not only with foam tires but with the rubber tires as well. Um, the tire budget has to fit into the race program. Um, there's a spider on my camera right now. Did you see that, dude?
I'm
He
going with
was right.
that.
He was right on the lens. He's still there. Anyway,
Right?
the tire budget gets to be a contributing factor in your race program. I was talking to Steve Schuttenberg about tires, and he races touring car a lot. That's his favorite class, I think. He said he gets about a month's worth of racing out of a set of the touring car tires. Now, I don't know what brand he's using. I didn't ask. But generally, with the road course stuff and the oval stuff, it's going to be different. Your tire wear and your tire budget is going to be two totally separate animals. I noticed right away with the 12 scale 21 truck that the foam tire wear with the excessive positive camber and negative camber tends to do the tire in pretty quickly. With on-road, that kind of stuff is not as drastic as an oval. So, um, I don't know. Just to me, you're going to have to kind of ask around the guys in the pits how long they get out of a set of tires depending on the setup, because everybody's setup is different, and I imagine everybody's tire wear is probably a little bit different. Like you said, you start with a little bit larger diameter tire to begin with. Uh, I was totally dumbfounded when I got back into this and saw these guys were spending like $30 on a pair of tires and chewing them down to the rim. Like, you can see the plastic through the foam kind of deal. Buying tires and trying to go racing gets kind of expensive. So I try to lean more toward the slower classes and the less abusive classes on the tires.
Yeah. With my 12 scale 21.5 truck, um, the setup will have a lot to do with the tire wear as well. If the setup's not nearly as aggressive, um, and you have a really good setup under the car, obviously you're not going to wear the tires down as much
Right.
as something that's driving hard into the corner, and the setup's a little bit off. I find myself with the 10th scale pan car stuff that the right rear tire takes the most abuse because that's the dry tire.
Exactly.
If the front end is set up correctly, and the car handles fairly decent, um, you shouldn't have very much tire wear. It shouldn't wear down as quickly.
Right. The other thing that I kind of wanted to touch base on here tonight is a little track safety. Um, I've witnessed a few things here over the last couple months that kind of concern me, and we as adults, like I was telling Jimmy here earlier, we kind of take that risk into our own hands. We know if we get hit with a car or whatever, it's kind of part of the program. But I've seen several small children come almost a hair of harm's way. Um, I've been experiencing this not only for the drivers, but for the marshals as well, and for the kids in attendance, the spectators, the little people that are watching us do our thing. Um, when you're marshaling a car and your first instinct is that knee jerk, I gotta get it, I gotta get out there and get it. I encourage you to take a half a second and see what traffic is coming before you step out onto the track. I've seen people personally step directly on somebody's car, not only turning that little carbon fiber trinket into toothpicks, but almost injuring the marshal as well. And a lot of these classes, like Jimmy Williams runs open mod, these cars are hauling the mail, man. You're talking, probably close to 50, maybe even 60 miles an hour. And basically, I saw kids getting real close to the track without a whole lot of supervision. Um, and I've been to other places where it's the same thing. You got to be conscious as a spectator. You got to be conscious as a driver. You got to be conscious as a marshal. So I don't know. I personally was at the On-Road Nationals in Florida and was hit in the foot at 72 miles an hour by Michael Salvin. Um, Peeled the whole front uh, right side of the car off too, by the way, and almost floored me. Well, hey, let's put the fat guy at the end of the straightaway to marshal. He might be able to do it. No, it doesn't work that way. But the cars were clocked at 72 miles an hour down the back straightaway, and I couldn't get in between the cars quick enough and got nailed. I didn't screw up the car intentionally. I screwed up the car trying to marshal another guy's car who was stuck. So not only was it the car that was broke that I was marshaling, but it was the car that I broke marshaling. So I encourage you guys to take a serious look and raise your level of consciousness when you're at the track racing. I'm sure Jimmy's probably seen it, and we've all probably seen it, truthfully.
Peripheral vision is everything. Our track is kind of small enough where you should be able to see both ends of peripheral vision.
Yeah. Yeah, the indoor stuff is not as bad as the outdoor stuff sometimes.
Yeah. Even marshaling at our track, we try to have one marshal in each of the four corners on the oval racing stuff.
Right.
Or if there's not enough, then we try to have two guys at one end and one at the other, or one guy at either end.
Right. And if you're not physically capable of doing it, or you don't feel safe doing it, please let the race director know what's up so that he can cover the situation. I myself am physically unable to do it anymore. I'm trying right now to get back to the point where I can physically marshal after my races again. There's nothing worse than getting hit with a car or something because you can't move quick enough. There's no need for a 911 call.
Yeah, and if there's, as a race director or announcer, if we see that there's not enough guys without the marshals, we'll ask for volunteers.
Yeah, there's a lot of volunteer coverage.
Certainly help when guys do come out to volunteer, because think of it this way: you would want somebody to race.
Yeah.
If you got hung up somewhere, crashed or something, if you have the time and the ability to do so, we ask that you please help us out if you can. Because again, if your race didn't have enough marshals, you would want somebody to marshal your car to get crashed out.
Right. And the other thing is kind of a little accountability issue for me. Like, if you see someone doing something that they shouldn't be doing safety wise, call them out, dude. Say something. Let somebody know. Tell the race director. Don't sit there and suck it up and be quiet about it. If you see somebody that's doing something in an unsafe manner, whether it be marshaling or letting their kid get too close to the track or whatever it may be, please speak up. Please.
Yeah, for sure. Don't hesitate to come talk to any of us at the track and just learn the show.
Definitely. Well, Jimmy, that's all I wanted to cover for tonight. I'm sorry we missed Jimmy Williams. He must have got tied up doing some chainsaw work or something. So, like always, like I say, God bless until next time. Jimmy, thanks for... Yeah, that's right. Thanks for spending some time with me tonight, buddy. I appreciate it. We'll see you at the track.
All right.